The Judicial Services Commission has kicked off its second round of interviews for appointments across various courts in the country. It's appraising candidates for the Supreme Court of Appeal, the High Courts of Limpopo and Gauteng, as well as the Labour and Labour Appeal Courts. Researcher and Advocacy Officer of Judges Matter, Mbekezeli Benjamin, joins us now to share his views on the proceeding. Good evening and welcome to you, Mbekezeli. This is a sacred function that the JSC is carrying out. Those appointees will decide the fates of people in the execution of their duties. But the JSC has come under criticism before. What's your take in the specific moment on how the process is unfolding so far?
Well, good evening, Iman, and good evening to the viewers. You are spot on when you describe it as a sacred proceeding that the JSC is undertaking on behalf of all of us. It's a constitutional duty that they should take seriously. And I'm pleased to say that of the interviews that we've seen today, we are seeing a lot of good work. The JSC has been focused, has been respectful. At points, it has been quite robust in terms of the kinds of questions that are asked of the candidates. But in doing so, they have remained firmly on the mission of finding the very best people to be judges in our courts. It's quite a relief, actually, to see these interviews and the ones that happened earlier this year, when you compare them to the earlier years where the JSC has faced quite a lot of criticism over how those interviews were run.
Well, I'm glad to hear that commentators and people who are really scrutinizing the space, such as yourself, have a sense of comfort about these proceedings. You use the word focus. You've commented as well recently on the misfocus in how these interviews have been previously carried out, that it seemed to be on political mudslinging, attacks on candidates, when the real focus ought to always be on the candidates' track records in the actual execution of the law. Just go into that in a little more detail.
Yeah, Imam, one of the things that were quite common about the JSC is that inevitably after each session you'll see videos on Twitter where the commissioners were really one-upping each other to see who will make the most grandest political statements that had very little to do with the candidates and the candidate's ability to be a judge, but were really trying to sort of take the 15 minutes of fame that the TV cameras give them. So a lot of the things in the past had to do with the candidates, the JSC itself, not having enough focus. For example, they never had written criteria of what they were looking for. So they were undertaking interviews, but they couldn't tell you what they were looking for and how much or how badly the candidates performed in terms of those criteria. And that again has changed since April this year, where the JSC now has written criteria which clearly set out the kind of qualities they need of the candidates. So that's why when we compare these interviews in the past, there's some level of comfort that the JSC is going in the right direction.
So South Africa's busiest division is Gauteng, where we are tonight. What do you make of the field of High Court contenders there? 5 out of the 7, we understand, are senior counsel.
Yeah, it's a really remarkable field, and Gauteng is actually scheduled for Thursday this week. But in all the years that I've watched the JSC interviews and I've monitored the candidate list, this is, I think, the strongest list that I've seen, where you see 5 of the 7 candidates being senior counsel. And often senior counsel don't make themselves available for judicial office, particularly in Gauteng, because there's a lot more money to be made out there. There's a lot more prestige that comes with being senior counsel. So for someone to give up that kind of career for public service as a judge, it tells you how much they now take the role of a judge and how seriously that they take this process, that they will actually submit themselves. And this is something that we've been saying to the JSC, that the worse that you run this process, the more likely you'll get bad candidates. And you can see now that we're getting at least an improvement of the candidates. That's because people are seeing the sign that the JSC is changing for the better.
I've only got about a minute or so I'm torn between asking you about transformation and the inclusion of women, because it's an auspicious year, 100 years since the Women's Legal Practice Act allowing women to practice in law. That's the anniversary. And I see the SCA is doing quite well on its female representation. So let me rather go to this question. There is a big context, Mbekezeli, Mbekezeli, that we're having this discussion in. Routine judicial housekeeping seems to be falling by the wayside. Reserved judgments going undelivered for a long time. The frequency with which High Court findings or just court findings in general are overturned. How much quality is there in the system in your estimation, and how can it be improved?
Very quickly, Iman, quality has been one of the things that has not been focused on for a very long time. And we actually are pleased to see that the JSC and the Chief Justice are reporting again on those reserved judgments. But what we are calling for is action. The JSC has been slow to act against judges who don't meet the standards of judicial office. And what we're now calling for is the JSC to put enough emphasis on holding judges accountable. And that's what we hope to see even this week.
All right. Well, very good signals then, Mbekezeli. And we'll keep an eye, as you say, these interviews continue to unfold, even for the Labour Court and the Labour Appeals Court. So very, very important appointments being made this week, and we'll keep you front and centre with those developments. Thank you very much for your time tonight, our guest there from Judges Matter.